Good evening, everyone, and thanks for sort of calling me here and letting me sort of talk about what I think about mobility in Mumbai, what I think about accessibility, and also share my experience of a few years of working very closely with the government and sort of community, and just generally working on mobility issues in Mumbai. I mean, I'm sort of it's very humbling to know there are people here who are working on this for so many years. So if there is anything that you sort of see that I've done wrong here, please feel free to tell me. I'm only just learning. Right. So thank you, Arvind. So I work with with an organization called WRI. Right. It's called the World Resources Institute. We call ourselves a global research organization. Reason I'm saying something about WRI again is because I've not even included a logo. It skipped me to even do that. I was just going on adding stuff that I wanted to say. So I'll just give you a little bit of sort of more background about myself. So I'm a civil engineer by sort of undergraduate training, and then I went for my master's in civil engineering in Virginia Tech. It's in the US. So my master's specialization was transport. So I sort of specialized in transport engineering and transportation planning. So my thesis was planning, but a research project I was doing was sort of on engineering. So it was so there is a certain form of transportation planning that I learned, and I learned it over 2.5 years and another 6 months working with my professor in the US sort of on some projects. And then I came back immediately. I started working in the transport consulting world. It's a small world, it's a small set of people. They keep doing the same thing, and it seems like it's really difficult. When I came back, I was like, oh my god, I mean, nobody's wanting to tell you sort of what it is, but after a while you realize you're sort of working 14 hours a day, but essentially doing sort of something that is so similar and so problematic now. Before I begin, I am going to share stories, like I said, from my experience working very closely with the city in the last 5 years. Happy friendly disclaimer: if you are having a problem or don't agree, assume it is fictional. We can have an offline conversation about it. I am really not responsible for things that. So transport planning, right? I mean, the reason I call this a transport planning paradox is because it's a constant paradox in my mind. I mean, so this is transportation planning that I learned. This is transportation planning that is being used to justify or kind of propose projects from the highest scale to sort of the minimal. It's sort of, so what transportation planning in the traditional sense wants to do is it wants to understand mobility planning in the urban areas. Simple. It wants to understand factors that influence mobility, relationship between the mobility and sort of those causal factors. Through that, it wants to predict future mobility. So any project that is happening in Mumbai or anywhere else or has happened through a process which has this at the base of it. Okay, it's sort of, so I'll quickly take you through the process. We won't spend too much time on this, but just, I mean, so to use the predictable mobility pattern, future requirements to meet the future demand. We are constantly doing planning to meet what we think is the future demand. Right? So remember this, to meet the future demand. Oh, I'm going back. Now, so, I mean, I tried to sort of this very complex world of transport planning that I've learned over 2.5 years and worked for 5+ years, sort of before I moved to WRI, to kind of look at this from the other side. I mean, so basically what we do is what we would do is we would assess what happens in the base year. Okay, so there is a standard model. A model is sort of it's like a mathematical equation, right? So it is called a 4-step model. It's a gravity model. It is used to predict future demand and therefore propose projects that meet the demand. Okay, so what we do is, so the model has 4 steps. So it's trip generation, trip distribution, mode split, and trip assignment by mode. Trip generation, what is trip generation? Assume Dadar as a zone, assume Mahalakshmi as a zone. So Dadar will have trips that will produce. So if half of you live in Dadar, you will make a trip, right? So that is the trip produced. Dadar will have trips attracted. right? So if I am coming from Mahalakshmi to Dadar, this is the trip attracted to Dadar. Similarly to every other zone. So in the generation model, we find out trips produced and attracted. Zone is preferably a homogeneous zone. So by theory, by definition, the zone has to preferably be homogeneous. What is homogeneous is it shouldn't have sort of various uses and all those things. What is trip distribution? If you have to go from, let's say, Dadar to Mahalakshmi to Lalbagh to somewhere, correct? So what percentage of those that are produced go to the sort of zones outside, are distributed and attracted in that distribution? I'll tell you why that makes point. Now, modal split. You know what a mode is? Anybody knows? I'm going to stop this technical after this slide, you know, I mean, sorry. Just the reason I wanted to say this is because I just wanted to, you know, I wanted to simplify this. Things that have been made so complex to me, to intimidate me to understand, are really simple problems. What is, do you want, anybody here sort of, okay, fine, I'll just quickly say, right? A mode is basically your mode of travel. So if you're walking, your walking is your mode of travel. If you're taking an auto rickshaw, that's in technical terms called the intermediate sort of public transit or public transport, so train. So mode is your mode of travel essentially. So after we distribute trips, let's say we distribute 30% to go from Dadar to Lalbagh, 40% to go to Mahalakshmi, and another, I don't know, I mean 30 more percent to go to somewhere, Mahim, right? So then we kind of further distribute them by mode. How many go by which mode? Okay, I'm going to assume it's okay. Then what we do is we sort of do a trip assignment, right? So if you have to go from Dadar to Mahim, and if there are 4 ways to go from Dadar to Mahim, which is the first way that you will take to go from Dadar to Mahim? What will you do? अगर आपको दादर से माहिम जाना है, what will be your first sort of way? Let's say there are A, B, C, and D. There are 4 routes that go to. What route will you prefer? What will be your first preferred route? Route. I'm talking route. Purely route. Shortest, right? Shortest, fastest, etc. Now all of us decide to take the shortest or the fastest route. That route gets saturated, right? Then your decision changes. Correct. So then the assignment happens to another route, and so on and so forth. So there are models, there are softwares that are used to sort of do this. Now this sort of, in the base year, we check it against the measured volumes. So all the surveys in the textbook of transportation planning are done under this. You can, so there are studies at several scales. So there is the biggest study we call as the comprehensive sort of mobility plan, which includes everything. There can be a small study. Let's say example, a mall is coming. A mall is coming. By law, they are required to sort of justify that they will not saturate the road outside. So you have to do a study. Every study, it has this sort of way of planning at the heart of it. Now let me come back to the assignment. So Dadar से Mahalakshmi to Mahim जाना है. There are 4 routes. Everybody sort of picked. So trips got assigned to these routes, right? So now what we do is, from the base year, we kind of do these land use allocations and all these things, and based on certain factors and several assumptions, several assumptions, we predict for what will happen in what is called the horizon year. Typically, large transport planning studies will practice across the short term, medium term, and long term. Right, horizon years. You don't predict only for 2034 and start building it for it right now. Correct? So what happens is, once you have predicted the assignment, right? So once you've put those trips, and they are by mode, of course. So I know by mode so it is also by mode. The question was, what route would you take? That becomes the volume on that corridor. So let's say you're going by Cadell Road to Mahim. The model has put trips on Cadell Road. So in the horizon year, let's say 2024 is the horizon year for my base year 2019, I will have a certain volume for Cadell Road. Now I have to plan for that volume. Right? I have to plan for that volume. So I have to essentially provide capacity for that volume. Now vehicular capacity is the unit of vehicular capacity is per lane per hour, and it's sort of PCU per lane per hour. So PCU is essentially a passenger car unit. For simplicity, assume it's cars per lane per hour. I have X volume that I have predicted. I have to provide capacity. Obviously I don't have enough capacity. In a city like Bombay where streets were sort of narrow, there is never enough capacity. Never ever enough capacity, right? How much capacity can I add? Right? So this is just sort of, this is, but I mean, this, I think, please sort of feel free to kind of say what I think is wrong, but just so projects are then sort of justified based on demand forecasts, which is most often merely an exercise of projecting past and sort of current trends into the future. I'm guilty of doing that. I'm not going to say what I did and I sort of how and all, it was a part of my job. So then, I mean, transportation planning essentially, is it sort of foreseeing a certain rise, or is it justifying a certain investment? What is it doing? I mean, but I mean, all said and done, all these, so transport planning is very often a very slippery slope. This is what I feel. I mean, it is such a slippery slope. We always end up talking about moving vehicles somehow or the other. Even if I start with a preamble saying we have to move people, we end up talking about moving vehicles. Transportation planning does that. It essentially does that. It seeks to build capacity. So as a traffic engineer, if you want to get a job as a traffic engineer in any sort of firm, here's one thing that can help you. Okay, so traffic engineering has three. I don't have it here, but I'll quickly share. It has three simple things at the heart of it. There are complex sort of ways in which you deal with those things and all that. That's later. But let's say year one, straight road. There is an intersection on the straight road. Very little traffic, right? We've just begun as sort of a city or whatever. Very little traffic. So you don't even put a signal on that intersection, right? Because the traffic manages itself, right? Now, as years go by, traffic grows. As years go by, traffic grows. So now your junction has so many conflicts that it is sort of creating a delay on all the approaches of your junction. So then you put a signal. You put a signal to regulate it. As years go by, your traffic grows more. Now you had two signals, you had two junctions on your corridor. Now you put this signal. In the red of this signal, the queue goes past this signal. In traffic and transport planning, this is called oversaturated conditions, where the queue hits the previous junction. Now what do you do? So you make it one way, correct? You increased capacity, right? So 100 cars were going in this direction on this side of the road. You made the entire road one way. So now you have 200 cars that can go. So the queue that was reaching here is not going to reach here. It's going to end here because you doubled your corridor, right? This one way is not new to people who've sort of seen Pune. This one way is not new to people who've seen Bangalore. This is the reason why they were made one ways. I don't know if you guys have experienced this planning. I don't want to ask you, but tell me, I mean, in Bangalore, anybody's gone to Residency Road? In Bangalore? FC Road in Pune?
Yeah.
Gone? How easy is it to cross FC Road in Pune?
Not possible.
At the heart, because it's been made a one way. If it wasn't, there would have been a regulation. You would have found a gap. Again, in transport planning, the gap is measured in seconds. A gap is when your assessment says that you can cross from here to there. It's 3 seconds you think and you will sort of get there. One way, it's not going to. In Residency in Road in Bangalore, I remember, I mean, last month I was there. I had to walk 500 meters till I could find a safe crossing on an intersection. Intersections are not bad. They are good, right? They regulate traffic in many ways. Now, one way is also going to get saturated, right? Again, I'm not saying anything hypothetical. They are real examples, real our cities have experienced. What do you do then?
Flyover.
Exactly. These are questions that any traffic and transport planning engineer has to go answer in the interview if you're going at a sort of starting entry level. It doesn't stop there. It did not stop there. Let me rather just say, I was kicked out of my first interview when I came back to India. I was like, if this gets saturated, then I said, then there is a big problem. You need to really rethink. But why not another flyover? engineering allows you to do this. We have high grade concrete, we have really sort of equipment that can build this. It can build 2 flyovers, one above the other, right? I mean, on JVLR in the western suburbs, if you see Metro Line 6 is going to have 3 layers, I think. On the public consultation, correct me if I'm wrong, it's going to have a road, it's going to have a metro above, and there is already an existing flyover. So it's going to, engineering allows you to do this. It's probably the beauty of engineering, right? It allows you to do this. But I mean, it's such a slippery slope. We all recognize, I mean, 2006 the NUTP said the same thing that we all still say, is that focus on moving people. No, it's such a slippery slope. We always end up here. And then this planning here, hierarchical planning, paves the way for making it easier for vehicles to move again. So I mean, you all must have heard what is an arterial, what is a sub-arterial, what is a collector, what is a local road, right? Arterial is sort of the main road. It's based on 2 things. It's based on access to property and through movement through speed. So if you have high speed, low access to property, your hierarchy is high. Therefore, freeway is the highest speed, lowest access to property, and so on, so forth. In our condition, does this apply? SV road, LBS Marg, SBS road, Cadle road, which arterial? I'm saying arterial because this is being termed as an arterial by all of us. Which arterial does not have direct access to property? How is it different from a collector road except that it provides direct so it does not fit this model. I mean, so reason I'm saying this is because we adopted this. Our codes also provide speed limits for this model. We adopted this, instantly paves way for making available capacity for moving more vehicles. Right. So just in this light, what I'm telling you is been a prevailing practice in transport planning from, if I remember correctly, what I've learned from the 50s. Started in the US, we adopted it. So whatever happened in Mumbai was justified through this process. This is not new to many of you, I'm sure, and I've missed one thing here. Let's see if you'll point it out. But I think I was just looking this up I think it started with the establishment of the MSRDC in 1996. I was a small child then. But since then, we built, I've missed one thing here, but still, whatever I haven't missed, let's see. We built the Bandra-Worli C-Link. We made the JVLR, Eastern Freeway, SCLR, Metro. I don't know what it is. My colleague put this, she's not. Anyway, and then the monorail. Now, this is, first of all, this is the years of construction. From the year 2000, look at the period, we've been constructing major projects one after another. I think I was in the US when the years of respite were there, correct? I mean, tell me if all you guys are here. Did we have? I mean, right now we are upgrading, we are under construction. I mean, anyway, you're talking about 11,800. I missed one major thing here. You just said that a while ago. I missed the 50, so it is listed as an achievement on the MSRDC website. You still go and see. I missed the 50 flyovers Mumbai transformation project, another 2,000 crores. So you're almost right. So if you actually map the rise of automobiles, I mean, there is a direct correlation. I mean, we've constantly, this is gray on so therefore you're not, but it's the same slabs there. I mean, this is the rise of vehicles. I mean, it was aided obviously by the rise of flyovers, but look how exponentially they've grown. I mean, it's you built roads, you created demand, you got all the supply, you got oversaturated, you built road.
That's one part of it. We also did not pay attention to public transport. So along with the rise in vehicles, you will find the decline.
Absolutely.
Response to that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I mean, here I just want to show you, in spite of just one line, so it's 4 lakh trips of the 30 million that are happening in Mumbai. But clearly, I mean, so the investment was, this is what I'm trying to say happened in the last 2 decades. Public transport didn't happen in the last 2 decades, so it didn't feature on my graph, but absolutely you're right. So I mean, 15,000 plus crores, you know, I mean, some people say 20,000 crores, whatever. I mean, even if you assume a very bare minimum for annual maintenance of 5 to 10%, I mean, you're still talking 1,500 crores every year to sort of now maintain what you have built. And I'm not, I mean, I think we all have to go past blaming this, right? Because we are locked in. See, the thing about mass infrastructure is that it's locking in. It's locking you in, and not just about mass infrastructure. We will see ahead in my talk how smaller decisions that we are taking is also locking us in, and how it is doing that. But I mean, it's so, what did we get? I mean, at the end of it, I remember I used to work in IIT in 2003, whatever, 4. They were just building those flyovers. I used to ride a bike. Then I was on first and second gear. Then I'm on first and second gear now. I'm talking peak hour. So what is the demand? Remember the demand from the first slide that I said. I mean, did it cater to the demand, or did it cater to sort of kind of create a demand? I mean, the demand is clearly, I mean, so when I'm saying what is the demand, I'm going to quote from the study called a comprehensive mobility plan that the MCGM did in 2014. Anybody that is quoting numbers is quoting off of it, because this is the largest study that has been done in Mumbai. So I mean, none of us have gone there and kind of put our own money and create. I mean, we've all done in small bits and pieces, but really the demand, a study on a city level was done by MCGM, sort of through MCGM by a certain consultant. So again, if you open the CMP, it's going to say the same thing, you know. I mean, the stated objective, the first slide that I showed, objectives of transport planning, the CMP was also pretty much doing that. Right, 51% of all trips are walking trips. I know most people here that are already aware. For those that are not aware, this is the number. What is a trip? A trip is you or me going from point A to point B with a purpose. So you going to Lal Bagh and coming back is not one trip. You going to Lal Bagh and coming back is 2 trips. Why? Because you are loading the network twice. Because I have to plan for you for coming both times. Right, so it is 2 trips. We are 51% of all trips. I mean, this is 2014-15 number. We've not changed too much since then, and we never had lesser sort of numbers. Is walk trips, and this is not even trips that are sort of the first and the last leg of a public transit trip. This is A to B with a purpose trips that are walk trips. So they were it was very smartly. I mean, here I have this. So this was the mode share in the base year. So the study's base year was 2014. This was the modal share. Now this modal share does not have pedestrian. So what it did is it took out the non-motorized transport trips and then has a share for only the motorized trips. Correct? So now it seems like the car share is sort of 11.6%. But if you create a common denominator, one interpretation, it can be debatable, but one clear interpretation is that your car trips were still less than 6%. Right? You take 50% out, you create a common denominator, you see what this is, slash it. This was their first horizon year 2019. Reason I have this is because I don't know the exact numbers here. I can't conduct a large study to find out. But anyway, we can reasonably assume that not much has changed from their prediction in the horizon year, because not much mass public transit infrastructure has been added. If anything, I mean, definitely car trips would have gone up. Motorcycle trips, I assume, has probably gone up. But anyway, I mean, BST gone down was their prediction also. Right? And this sort of, it's funny actually, you know, if you're planning, you should plan for a higher this, and therefore plan for projects that bring you higher this. But you very humbly sort of resign to a certain fate, or whatever you call it.
Two-wheeler trips has gone down.
No, it's not gone down. I'm saying this was their prediction when they released the study. We don't know if it's gone down or not. For me, it doesn't matter.
Yeah. Certainly not.
It's been around in the same percentage. It doesn't matter. Yeah, it really, I mean, we stop focusing.
The two-wheelers is so high.
Yeah.
It is very unlikely that it will have gone down. It has to go and go.
Yeah. Registration have gone up, right? I mean, but anyway, I'm saying it doesn't matter. It's still in the same zone. Focus here. Anyway. While we did that in the last 2 decades, there were several new trends that were sort of witnessed, and several cities were adopting those trends. Okay, I mean, so this is a graph that sort of our colleagues at Embark had put up, one of our directors. I mean, a lot of these trends, look at this. This is the year 2000. So if you can't see, this is 2000, this is 2010, sort of, and it's only gone up. I mean, so there are several new trends. I mean, car sharing came, bike sharing came, complete streets happened, car-free zones, sort of apps and open data. So open data is essentially, I mean, let's say BST, for example, has GPS on all their buses. They take the dynamic data, put it in a standardized format, and then open it up to people. It's 2019. We have umpteen number of amazing computer engineers who can sort of build apps and cater to several different problems. Right? Let's assume your app told you where your restroom is, I mean, or whatever. Or so they can kind of find solutions to problems we can't think of. And it's happening for free. All you have to do is, as a government, enable. Fine, I mean, there are challenges to open data and all. We are not having that conversation today. Fine, so low emission zones happened, bus rapid transits happened, smart cards and sort of those common mobility cards happened across several cities. So these are essentially these new trends. Okay, so complete streets, if we have to kind of categorize them, road infrastructure with universal access. Universal access is basically access for all. Nothing, I mean, no person in this city with any condition whatsoever should not be able to navigate the city. You should not sit at home if you think you had an ankle fracture. You should not be having to sit at home if you are sort of blind or anything. Universal access, mass transit with buses, bus rapid transit. I mean, essentially, we'll see ahead. I mean, it's sort of you're creating capacity. What capacity you're creating, it differs, right? You're creating people moving capacity here, but it's transit-oriented development, multimodal integration, shared mobility and regulations. That sort of and demand management. We are doing all this in a little bit. I mean, you're in the parking sort of committee. I don't know. I mean, I know how it's going, but anyway, that's so these were trends that were observed while we kind of did that in the last 2 years. Okay, going ahead from here, I have a very clear agenda that I wanted to sort of talk about. I mean, and this is based on my experience working with the corporation and several agencies in the last 4-5 years. Is we're going to talk on streets. Complete streets by definition is sort of a fancier definition. It kind of has like the footpath, the cycle track, the kind of the bus lane, and then the mixed vehicle lane, the median, and all those things. We will talk about streets in our context. We will see what is possible, where we are going wrong. Right, just, I mean, it all starts with reimagining the city. Reimagining the city, I'm not an architect. When I joined Embark, for several architects, I saw so many reports of reimagining. This was from architects in our architect, urban designers, planners in my organization. I went out, I saw so many reimagining. I start talking the same language now. We have to constantly reimagine. I mean, see, transport problem, especially the urban transport problem, is very clear. And it has a simple solution, and it's low cost. But the biggest problem is that we never are going to be able to apply that solution. So it's the wine that we have to keep packaging and repackaging. I mean, and while we do that, several disruptions are happening. Several disruptions, as we know, it's Ubers and Olas were the disruptions, public bicycle sharings were disruptions are happening. I mean, but really the problem at the heart of it is still the same, and the solution is still fairly simple. Anyway, so this chart based, so this is Copenhagen, this is Melbourne, this is England. All this, so it's not like these cities have become what they are like this. It didn't happen like that. Copenhagen in the late 50s and the 60s was seeing as much automobile sort of traffic as we probably think or see here in Mumbai, you know, but so a better city step by step. Why? Because in 1962 or 67, I can't remember, they kind of pedestrianized one main street in the old city. After that, for 2 decades, they building on that and using parking as a tool. Right, so they used parking regulations as a tool to dhire start doing that to more and more streets. Their transformation is a transformation story of 4 decades. It's not happened overnight. It's not snapped like it's a transformation story of Melbourne. Melbourne in 1995, when a lot of cities, civil engineering kind of technology and practices had boomed, we had sort of these mass infrastructure that was kind of available to build mass projects. Melbourne in 1995 decided, so they had this youth alcoholism problem. Apparently then there was a lot of youth, and it was actually directly correlated to their life in the city. You couldn't go around the city, so the city decided that I'm going to make my public spaces better, and their definition of public spaces was the streets. Streets are the largest continuous network of public spaces, right? We all sort of experience it, but we probably don't. Their definition, they were committed to building beautiful public spaces in their city. They had a city facade program, so it's so easy. These are all local area planning strategies that can use to kind of create like these uniform facades, how your city looks and all. London also, the day they started congestion charging, they also announced a program. They announced this 100 public space program and all. Money went from here into developing more public spaces and public transport. So it's sort of Mumbai, we are in such a unique situation. We are just, it's so complex to describe where we are. We have a huge potential, right? We used to be, we sort of still are, I'm confused to say this, compact, diverse. We have a pretty amazing public or had a pretty amazing that. We still have this. We are building so many metros. I'm okay. And then we have this, this percentage that walks, we actually calling it huge potential also. Now it's seeming to me that we were on the way to, but high number of pedestrians does not indicate high quality walking spaces. No, it does not. So and the issue lies in how we design. Okay, high number of pedestrians does not mean high quality spaces, correct? Look at this street. This is Curry Road flyover. This side is Bharat Mata Junction, right? There is a new high rise that came up called Vana Vigna Park. A lot of our streetscape has what is called active edges, right? So it has these shop fronts, active. Then there is a footpath here. So this is what is called as the carriageway. A carriageway essentially is a portion of the street that is used for vehicles moving. Footpath or sidewalk, or some call it pavement, is sort of this. Then this is called the divider or the median. Fine, this is a carriageway. I don't know how this was planned, how this was, whatever, there was any calculations done or whatever, but someone assumed when you built a carriageway this wide that you would get a capacity that is sort of offered by this width, right? Typically, let's say 1,000 vehicles per hour per lane. 1.6 meter footpath is actually okay. As per the Indian Road Congress guidelines, it should be 1.8, assuming but you can justify. So if you go tell someone, hey, listen, there's a footpath. No, it is as per guidelines. It's okay. But this is not how we design our city streets. It is not a civil engineering problem. It's social engineering. Civil engineering has to innovate in sort of catering to what? So there is a shop here. For all practical reasons, for the longest time, we know that the shop will have people that will want to buy from the shops. That will take some width, right? So you have 0.8 over there. It's called spillover activities. Then you have several of these. This is still a footpath that doesn't have many other things. We've seen footpaths that have so many. Here you kind of lost 0.6 or 0.4 meters or 0.3, whatever. Many streets have railings. Oftentimes, so you can't put the railing on this portion. This is a curb stone. So this is a cast stone that is precast. So you can't put the railing right on the edge. Then you will put a railing somewhere here. The railing will have some width of the foundation. So you won't put it very close to this, right? So this is a 0.2 meter. This is a 200 mm or 20 centimeter block. So you'll put somewhere. So you lost this 20 centimeter again. So you lost 0.2 meters. How much have you lost? You're left with 0.6 meters. How many people are going to be able to walk properly? And that too, continuity is a major problem. But I'm just saying, Result is that we don't have a Melbourne problem. We don't want to bring people on the streets. Again, just I miss saying the part in Melbourne. So they solved their alcoholism problem. Like, from 96 to 2005, they, because of their planning, increased 40% pedestrians on their street. We don't have to increase. We have people on the street. We have captive people on the street. People will obviously spill over. Peak hour is not just peak hour for the vehicles. Peak hour is peak hour for these people also. So the spillover happens in the peakest hour, which means you lose your intended capacity in the peakest hour. If you had approached this problem to design from the point of view of pedestrian, you would have made a 3-meter footpath. Because even in your peak, you're not getting this space, right? So let's just accept it. Simple. Nothing warrants you kind of to make this and then let people walking on the street. It's an obvious, what's an obvious problem also? One is you reduce capacity. Two is you're putting life in danger. Simple. So it's really, I mean, if you plan for them, you actually achieve your desired capacity. You improve your efficiency here as well. Now, this is the biggest thing, right? I mean, but where there are footpaths, people still prefer to walk on the streets. Really, this is how we're going to, this is Hill Road in Bandra, okay? This is the Lucky Junction, that is Mehboob Junction. We had done a quick study a few years ago, is to sort of see how people used this street, okay? So the pink or magenta here is where most people, this is small, I'll read. The pink here is where most people preferred walking on the carriageway. Carriageway is that section of the road where vehicle moves, remember. Yellow, ochre here is some walk on the carriageway. Some people walk on the carriageway. Green is where most people preferred walking on the sidewalk. Locate the green here. Right? So why did this happen? We walked the entire street several times. I mean, you have property lines, you have trees, you have fences, you have bus stops, you have electric box, you have vendors, you have parking. You sort of, and it's not it's just not bad for pedestrians. It has its massive impact on traffic. I mean, about 40% of your capacity is lost, is compromised just because we didn't plan for them. Just for information, I mean, so this road up here has a PPL now. It's one of those streets. So this portion now warrants the 23,000 fine or whatever. So you don't have these here, but you kind of have those barricades there. Okay, so it's still not user friendly for pedestrians. Let's say we are like, fine, let people get used to not parking. Tomorrow we'll absorb this in the footpath. Are we going to absorb? And if we do not absorb them into the footpath, how are we going to be able to? You can't have people standing as bodyguards every 50 meters and barricades there forever. Anyway, so its impact on traffic is massive. I'm going to just quickly, for the next few sort of slides, talk about 3 things. Let's assume you're going from a train station to some property here, right, from point A to AB. Focus on improving accessibility, the midsection and the intersection, because I cross here, I mean, our focus has to be this, right? It's just sort of simply kind of saying it. But so we have been working in Mumbai under this initiative called the Bloomberg Philanthropies Initiative for Global Road Safety. Michael Bloomberg, the sort of owner of Bloomberg and Bloomberg Philanthropies, he is also an ambassador for non-communicable diseases in the World Health Organization. Road safety by the road safety community is being projected as a public health issue. Sort of it kills about 150,000 people in this country every year. This is the reported number. World Health Organization says it kills 250,000 people. Anyway, so Bloomberg Philanthropies Initiative started in 2014, where sort of there was an MOU with the Chief Minister's office, and then MCGM was the signatory, and initiative was that we will help city improve road safety through partners that are experts in their respective fields. Several partners were there. Our job was to work on safer streets and safer mobility. How do you improve safety by design? and sustainable transport or public transport saves life, the logic there is, the lesser you kind of travel in vehicles, the lesser you are going to kill someone or sort of be vulnerable to death. It's just to basically trying to work with public transport. So we kind of did a lot of design work and all. I have not put in everything here, but just some of the things that we did, just my experience of working. This is HP Junction. This used to be HP Junction, thankfully. Look at this. So this is Turner Road. This street there goes to Bandra Station. This goes to Lucky Junction for anyone who knows Bandra. So Linking Road and SV Road. This is evening peak. Evening peak. A lot of people are coming through Turner Road wanting to go to the station. Right, so this is a it's like many other stations, we're very close to the station, major arterials. Look at this. People coming, waiting. Now, so these people now found what a gap is. Every young person sort of managed to run away. Most people could not. So they kind of gathered there. The moment they reached there, there was another green that reached there, right? We still have people coming because this is the peak. This is the peak for them, this is the peak for them as well. So this is slightly longer because I want to show you what happens even after, like. So now we lost patience. Very understandable that they would do. They have safety numbers. When you have many people, you have safety numbers. You decide to take the call, you don't know what will happen. But these people still didn't have a green to cross this approach because this right was sort of given, which makes your walking time over 100 seconds or something. Every time I've shown this video, I've lost patience in just a few seconds, and I'm sure a lot of you all did, right? This is how people behave. This is how all of us behave. We lose patience. There are several studies that have been done. So sort of 40 seconds to 70 seconds people start, and there is safety in numbers. So when there are numbers, people decide to take the plunge. They decide to walk past because they know they'll be saved. Here's the problem now. When there are not many numbers, people still go. They don't take a risk as they would when there are numbers. But very often what happens is, if you have to plan for a pedestrian facility in an event that there are not many pedestrians, idhar to zyada pedestrians bhi nahi hai. When there are fewer, they are the most vulnerable. Haji Ali Junction this is off the record, but Haji Ali Junction is it's such a huge irony, Haji Ali Junction has subways. It has subways on both sides, but every signal cycle, and I can bet on this, every signal cycle, you will have someone or the other who decides to walk on the top.
Yes.
They do, right? I can bet on this. You go anytime, if you find somebody not, tell me, not in the night hours, maybe then also. Then Haji Ali Junction has over 10,000, 11,000 plus volume now, right? So the coming from Cadbury going towards the ceiling is a continuous green. It's a continuous green. If you go notice, it doesn't have a red. In the face of this, people, now it is also where pedestrians have died. It is also where if I have to propose a pedestrian facility, first, by philosophy, we do not ever propose a grade separated pedestrian. We do not believe that pedestrians should have to walk up and down, and all vehicles should be doing that because they are pedaling an accelerator. But even it's such a tough decision, right? If you do a 20-second for pedestrians to cross, your volumes will probably go and all. But it's come down to this point where we have to choose between delay and safety. And when we keep saying pedestrians, we are not outside of it. Even if you are driving a vehicle, you are a pedestrian, or somebody very close to your heart who is a pedestrian. So none of us are not affected by it. Right, so this used to happen. This is what it was. So several, like Haji Ali again was a very similar example to this. These were all circles. when I was a child, I mean, when sort of, so these were all circles. So this junction also had a circle. Like Haji Ali was also a circle. I'm sure some of you may even remember that. So circles have a traffic constraint. Beyond a certain volume, they sort of don't function effectively. Obviously, volume grew as sort of years go. The circle was out, but the area remained the same. It was, so we had approach roads, and then we planted signals. Signals were probably planted before the circles were out. I don't know. I mean, if you see what is Dadar East, the circle, Kodagat circle, right? It has a signal. In spite of a circle, it has a signal. It's just because the volume is too high. So this big, I mean, here, this is where the crossing was. This median stopped here. People would come and first stop here. Vehicles also lose patience. As humans, we all lose patience. So anytime you go outside, especially in the suburbs, you see vehicles sort of, as their time is approaching, they are waiting. They will reach here. Right? It's also the pedestrian part. But anyway, what we did is we sort of did a design. We did count volumes over here, or we did a volume count. I mean, sometimes I don't do volume counts, like, oh, why didn't you do a volume? I'm like, I'm not going to reduce any lane. Okay, and I'll do a volume count if it's required, but that's another thing. We did here, this traffic was less than 1%. It has a very simple reason. There is no land use here, there is a lane above. When we proposed this, the easiest thing to convince was this closure. It was that, oh my god, oh yeah, nobody goes from there. It does not matter if that goes away. It does not matter. Point is, I mean, so you sort of be reduced. So intersection design has a very simple philosophy, okay? And it's sort of, again, this is controlling behavior by influencing behavior. Only provide as much space as is required for vehicles to move. Everything else, absorb that in the footpath. Because if you give any more space, somebody is going to sort of flout that, and you're going to get bottlenecks. You're going to get moving bottlenecks. So no, I mean, it was Mr. Bharambe. Then, like I said, I was also a part of Equal Streets. When we started Equal Streets in Bandra, Mr. Bharambe was the Additional Commissioner, West Region. So he was really kind of very much with us in the planning of Equal Streets. He moved as a Joint Commissioner Traffic at this time, and so I went to him. I mean, there was a trust. We managed Equal Streets really well, and also he did trust us with sort of doing something big. He said, fine, I said, let's test if you're worried. He gave 100 barricades, paints, and we had the drawings. I mean, so one night we just started putting it. This was the first time, and honestly, I was scared because nobody is upfront in reducing any space that is for vehicles, because we are all scared. Just the sheer pressure of vehicles gets to us. I was also, as much as my design, I was confident of it on paper, I was obviously scared. I was scared of bringing this out because the auto rickshaws and everybody here sort of goes so close to it and all those things. So eventually we did it could have been a lot more compact, but we were scared and we didn't want to fail in sort of an attempt. If this is a success, this allows us to take it back to the drawing board with more confidence. So which is what happened, I mean, our office people came out. We had a few sort of people helping. We by the morning of 1st April, 31st night, March, we'd gone, we did this space here. It was sort of taken, and it didn't matter. The moment you design, you influence behavior by design, right? So the moment you have spaces that are marked, not just marked, marking spaces does not solve your problem. It has to be in the desired path, right? It's all about wayfinding, and it has to be so intuitive. You don't want to go everywhere, read a board, yahan jao. It has to be so intuitive because you are trained to go in a certain way. You are going to find the shortest path. Put that in the desired path. People start following here. I mean, even though the desired path would have been here, people still followed. Right? That doesn't depend on any one thing. People still sort of follow. You created a public space. This is a video that we did for comparison to show everywhere, when we had done this. Did not matter to the traffic. If anything, the traffic police was so happy. I mean, look at that playground there and look at this here now. It's already a world of a difference. I mean, so this kind of, it did well. it did well. It gave us confidence to go back to the drawing board. It gave the MCGM confidence to sort of consider this further for permanent implementation. Right, I mean, just it's sort of, so a year and a half after that, more than a year and a half, I mean, because obviously there were all these issues. This is how it is today. This is how it was when it was in its best form. There is a few changes now, but I mean, again, I'm willing to sort of say that now go there, try to cross. I can reasonable confidence say that you're not going to be as intimidated as it was before. Some things changed in a couple of months of this, is that there were still people, I mean, we are always in flux, right? We have sort of, so car riders, it's not like they don't assert their rights, right? So there were still people putting pressure on Mr. Shelar, on the ward officer and all, you know, open this left turn, you know, the few of us that turn from here, it's increasing this. One, pehli baat toh, the earlier stop line was here. Not that it was ever followed. We already created so much extra holding space, right? I mean, and you can easily do, the very few that do, they can easily do. So then, as a compromise, as an acceptable, for me also a compromise has happened, is that this refuge area is now paved again and is now a slip lane. I'm okay with that personally. I'm like, fine, you know, I mean, this is not a technical job. It's also a lot of negotiations, right? We all are in the business of negotiations. Why I was okay is because I knew there was very, very few people that turn, you know, and so if more people stand here, the person, anyway, whoever will turn at a very much lower speed. And it was a fight that I knew we couldn't sort of fight anymore from here. So we left it, you know. One fine day maybe it'll still again become, but at least these became so much more accessible, and I keep going from here oftentimes to see what's the behavior. I see so many people here. Biggest worry was that you create a space that is open, you create a dwelling unit, or you pave the way for a dwelling unit or a dweller. About a year down, there is nobody dwelling here, no permanent dweller, no. Street space is about ownership, right? So if you create a space that is in the desired line or the desired path of several walkers, it's not going to be taken over by any other form of ownership. It does not. It's 1 year down. Nobody is worried. The ward is not worried. There are so Twitter is a new form of urban governance now. I mean, right? So my BMC. So I keep looking at it. A lot of people. The other day, some person tweeted. I was trying to find the screenshot. He tweeted that, you know, my BMC HOS, there is an illegal footpath, and that is not allowing me to take a left turn. So the handle also tweeted, yeah, you know, this has been beautified under CSR, but if you have a suggestion, let us know, we are open to it. Thankfully it ended there, and it mostly would have. But I mean, so there are people that sort of sell stuff and all, which kind of take a break, I would imagine, from selling and hang out here. And their photos are posted on Twitter saying that, you know, it's leading to their dwelling. I mean, why do we hate people? Fine, that's a different conversation. So it's, anyway, the point is that this is possible now. So this also, I mean, if you ask me to do this now, I would have compacted this a lot more. I was so intimidated. It was the first time. Now we know it does not make a difference. The moment we spoke to people, we did all of those things, you know, I mean, really people were okay, and it wasn't a surprise. That sort of trial became a success, so the MCGM was also confident to kind of give these people to do something on the most critical areas. This is Nagpada Junction. Massive. I mean, I don't know, no other word came to anyone's mind except chaos. I mean, so this is supposed to be a one-way here, because there is no other way for people from here to go out. They all come from here. I mean, there is no other alternative. And so just compliance was such an issue over here, but the volume that was given to us did not warrant any delay. I mean, we were like, this volume should be manageable, but where do you begin, right? I mean, so this is where we bought it, right? We sort of, again, the same principle. You kind of see this. here. So this is where the footpath was. This is where a lot of these share taxis take people to Baikala station. And it just, I mean, any square inch. Right, the point is, so here, you know, and again, I was scared. Every time we go somewhere and sort of think about reducing a space that is meant for vehicles, we are scared also. I am personally scared. Arey, kya ho jayega, you know, kuch to something and all. This, our design was here. This one was coming this far ahead. It's actually really not far, but it seemed so far ahead when you sort of were there to everyone. We kind of still, they allowed us because we were riding on some sort of good deed from before. They did allow us. This stayed on. This the locals and everyone managed, ensured that stayed on. A lot of other things went out. Then it was taken, and this is what it is right now. I'm going to leave this as it is. I want to show you this. This sort of was constructed to ease the movement on this garden and all that. Right now it's working amazing. I want to show you this. So everyone was worried. The police was like, "Arey, he kasha kami karnar," and all. But the flag here, they wanted to make this is a gallery. This is a viewing gallery. So the only way you could accommodate a viewing gallery was actually match our design. So they were like, "Oh no, the experts have said no, that this is how the design. So why don't we make a gallery?" So it got made. It just, if anything, if you go there, there is still a compliance problem. What I'm trying to say is that so much problem of compliance, nobody solves it, right? The traffic police will always end up telling you there are main kis ko pakadun, right? And everybody, so it will work in circles. We'll talk about it later, but the point is you make things self-enforcing, right? So when we were putting these barricades, we had put this here. Shamelessly. We were like just riding high on some strange confidence. But then somehow it kind of came here through negotiations. But I was standing right here, and as every day he would have done that, there was a biker coming from here wanting to park here. It was really easy for him to come then. He came here, we were all standing there, and this was completely taken. And the person on the bike who was waiting here, wanting to go there, said, "Boss, where are you going to go? I mean, are you like..." So it becomes self-enforcing, right? So then you have fewer people that don't comply because the lot just has to comply by force. Those fewer people can then be nabbed by the police and fined, right? So in a state of complete non-compliance, the police also does not enforce, they regulate. They cannot enforce, they have to regulate. If you fix your infrastructure, they also will go back to enforcing, which is what they started doing, right? Is that they trust you to actually, they trust you and the infrastructure to sort of work in a very sort of synchronized way. And if somebody does not, then they will sort of charge them under the law. But so it's sort of, you self-enforce it by design. I mean, this is some design principles, you know. I mean, I've made 3Ds of this ahead, but it's not, it's sort of, you ensure continuous length, continuous build. So I'm sorry, I don't think I want to go, but the point is that you ensure contiguous, focus on contiguity, not just continuity. What is the difference here is just imagine any street in Mumbai that has been widened or whatever. If it hasn't been widened for a consistent width, and when I say width, I don't just say width on the ground. When I say width that is effective, I'm saying width that is being used by vehicles every day. If it is not consistent, it's not performing its function in the most optimal way, right? So ensure you get contiguity. Everything else, start absorbing them in the footpath. If something comes, you have a buffer also. So if something comes, you eat into your buffer and you maintain footpath continuity also. Anyways, so just any obstacles can be sort of taken care of. Anything that, I mean, you comply, you die. I'm sorry I've put it so, but the point is that design can work either ways. So this is an opening in the divider or the median. It means I will be able to cross from here. Our land use for years now makes people want to cross, we don't blame them, we shouldn't, I guess, is because I have to go there for something. I mean, for God's sake, don't blame me for wanting to do that. Fine, I'll go a safer path if you create one. Point is, you opened this up, right? You paved the way for going. Fine, this is rains. I mean, those zebra stripes haven't been painted, but even if I painted the zebra stripes, if there is no form of protection here, so in this case, I might be pitted against so this is a really nice concrete sort of floor, right? I mean, a pavement. So it allows for really nice fast movement straight, and now you have zebra. So if I'm a pedestrian, you're telling me, hey, cross from here. If I'm a driver, you're creating conditions for me to just drive fast. So, I mean, I could argue that if you comply, you actually may die. Right? And again, I'm saying, when there are 100 people crossing, nothing will happen, most likely. Safety in numbers, but a few people will also cross when you open it up, right? I mean, if I'm the only one, but if I have to go, I will go. Same, I mean, on Bandra Worli Sea Link, right? I mean, so you make a nice, amazing straight road and you put a 50 kilometer per hour and hope that people will follow. No, it's not science. It doesn't happen. I mean, there is a certain percentile speed that a percentage of traffic goes, and that is what you use to create a speed limit. So if I actually do comply a 50 kilometers per hour on a very fast street, I may just get hit, because the 85th percentile is not complying. So this is I just want some stories. This is everywhere, okay? This story is everywhere. Sort of this. So I've just picked some to show. I'll quickly take you through it. I mean, but this is the Elphinstone Bridge. This was the bridge that the stampede had happened, the unfortunate incident. Again, I'm not putting this down as the only sort of story. Just take it as a case study or whatever. And so this is the East-West Bridge. Right, so this is the ramp. This is again the ramp. This is the F South Ward office, and this is what they call as the obligatory span or whatever. So this is the span, and this is also over 100-year-old bridge, right? So it was sort of, you had to put dividers on the street. So if you go there right now, you'll see this. You'll see these on the ramps on either sides, right? But what happened is that they decided to not put it here because it would have messed with the structural strength. So obviously that's a very powerful reason to not want to put that in the obligatory span, right? Now what happened is, you look at the dent here, this kept happening, right? I mean, so I'm not going to go why and how. Then, so this is very clearly visible. I mean, this is some time ago. So then you see this dent here, then this was put, right? See what happened to this. This has happened after, obviously, right? I mean, so this is sort of just, I mean, so now if you're moving from west to east, you keep going now. So now I've reached the east. Now there are several people. This is our next. This is just outside a station area. So there is a lot of high. Now this section here, okay, this is the section that again has an opening. So what do? I mean, so you kind of, if you create a pedestrian crossing here, the queue might just reach is one worry that is always stated, right? But the reality is that everyone is always crossing from there, and it's not been the end of the world for that. But the point is that because it's sort of left in a very kind of dekha jayega ho jayega way, it hampers either or. Now just a little ahead is the ward office, and then there's a gate of the ward office. So there's an opening to allow for any emergency to go. So every opening in the median is a pedestrian crossing. Fine, you may argue that it is not if you are the system designer. Hey, it's not, I have not put it is a pedestrian. If a pedestrian is crossing, it is a pedestrian crossing. Just a little ahead, right here, okay, there's another crossing. And you see, I mean, I think there's a medical facility. Now, this is so evident. Next time you go out and spot this, send me a photograph. is right is this. So many places median met manhole. So whenever the median met the manhole, it became an opening. I will not call it an opening, I will call it a crossing, because people are crossing, because you paved the way for crossing. I mean, so several sort of, see, this is the rigidity, right? So this is the lock-in. This,
Two-wheeler also cross.
everyone crosses, right? Everyone crosses. People cross across modes, whichever mode is allowed to cross by design. All this is a design issue. Again, I'm just trying to, I'm not pinning any blame on any institution. This issue can be resolved by design. See, this is the lock-in, the mass infrastructure, the kind of lock-in that it creates. This is a lock-in. This is a concrete pavement. In technical terms, this is also called as a rigid pavement. And the asphalt is called as a flexible pavement. And for the words that they mean, rigid, and they are actually performing in the same way. Concrete pavements, when they are laid, they call this a runner beam. If you have to put a divider on this is the only section on which you can put a divider. If you want to put a divider here, you have to break this entire slab and then sort of do something there and kind of, make an adjustment and put a divider. So if you made everything concrete and if you did not design it well, we locked ourselves in to kind of something that we are not going to be able to quickly change designs for. So, and when it meets a manhole, this is a design issue, right? I mean, anybody here will be able to think about, isko band karna hai to kaise karna hai, everyone. So yeah, I mean, this is the Mahalakshmi story. I mean, so everybody is aware of Mahalakshmi station. Satrasta se you come up, you go right towards Rakhangi Chowk and Varli Naka. You go here, come out of Mahalakshmi station and want to go to Varli Naka by bus. How easy or hard it is? Has anyone done this? Come out of Mahalakshmi station, had taken a bus. What was your experience?
Then you get bus to you.
Yeah, that's the question.
What?
It's very difficult to even get a bus because you have to cross, the bus is on the other side.
And far,
Yeah.
right? Its solution is very simple. Now, when you talk about it, you could have just made it very easy. If I told you that, hey, listen, I want you to make it easy for people to access the bus stops, you would have made it easy for people to access the bus stops. That doesn't mean you would have hampered vehicle movement, right? It's so intuitive. So that's what I mean. So, fence is waiting for us. The moment we go out, the bus stop is right there. And if you see, I don't know what's happening now. I keep going on. If I don't see a rope here. There was a rope holding people back. Again, I'm not wanting to put any blame. My assessment of this is that we found ourselves in this position now. So for the police over there, they have to manage a queue that goes all the way to Rakhangi Chowk. The queue now, though the Lower Parel bridge is shut, so a lot of people are coming here. You have to manage vehicles also. We found ourselves in a position where we have a station area also, and we have massive volumes outside also. Right, so holding people back, again, it's a game of patience, right? And it's a game of patience against your age and your ability and your so see, what I want to say, there are several influencers that sort of influence our urban kind of urban form or the street form, right? So you have a central agency, you have the ward, you have the traffic police, you have your elected representatives, community. I want to add Twitter now. But you have, so, and it depends. So, and everybody is influencing in different ways, but there are some things that have to standardize. Then there are challenges. There is a capacity challenge. There is this corridor versus intersection essentially. So there are tenders for corridors, there are tenders for intersections, So sometimes when they meet with different contractors having made, there is a challenge there. There is a challenge with the ward and the central agency, the islands, the gardens you see. Right, ward versus central agency. So central agency is the agency that does big projects. So if you have a whole road to construct, the central agency does. But the island is then managed by the ward. So, so if my contract is to do the road, I'm going to leave the island as is unless the ward comes in at the time. And also there are institutional challenges. I'm going to skip past the urban agenda, complete network. I want to just go to the non-negotiables, and I want to say that next time you encounter a problem, this is a quote that I want to say, although I'm talking simple things, small things, this is Jane Jacobs. anyone in the area of sort of sustainable transport and equitable transport and human, more humane transport knows her, follows her, has read her book, sort of. So she says, the trust of a city street is formed over time from many, many little public sidewalk contacts. Most of it is ostensibly trivial, but the sum of it is not trivial at all, so this is when I read this, I was like, this is exactly what I'm talking also. I'm sure this is exactly all the advocates that are sort of advocating for any form of sustainability is talking also. Is sort of, so I want to leave with the non-negotiables, okay, is that if there is an island, so this is a triangle, you'll see this everywhere in the city. If you are not able to walk across it, there is a problem. These are not just vehicle channelizers, these are people refuge also, meant for, so one thing is vehicle channelizing, second is meant to refuge people. If it is not refuging people, it is a design error, it is a problem. This is non-negotiable, this should happen. Refuge island. Next time you cross a road and you don't find a safe refuge island, what you want to demand is a safe refuge island. And I'm not saying a safe refuge island, if you just plant a refuge island conveniently over here, it makes it safe. Safe in your desired path. I'm trusting you to cross in the most sort of this way. And in your desired path, if you're not able to sort of find a refuge island before you cross this, there is a problem, design problem, and a very easy solution. It's a very easy solution, right? So when you reach the junction corner or anywhere, if you're not able to easily access, that is a design problem. We will keep saying till the end of time that motorcyclists use the footpath. It is a design problem. You can very easily by design stop them from using the footpath. Sort of, this is property gates, right? Fine, I'm saying, the other day there was a discussion on the WhatsApp group about how gates and all. But, if the footpath, so there is a reason why they say that this should be maintained the same color as this. Because the right of way is of the pedestrian. This person in the car, he or she should yield. This is an indicator of that. So if this stops here and if this is the same as this, then that is a design problem, because that is an obstruction in your path. If the gate comes out, it's obviously an obstruction. These are non-negotiable. See, you take your lane width, and then you start like this, right? You kind of standardize the lane width. You fix the lane width that you want. You fix the carriageway width. Everything else you start reorganizing. Bombay, Mumbai, whatever, can start changing by just reorganizing street space. I had several photographs. We don't have time to see it, but I'll share it with you guys if you want to see, or you can see it on your own eyes. Look at the unused space on the streets. Every square inch that is unused could have been made usable by design. Because if I tell you, hey, make this usable, you will figure out a way to do it. Trust me, it will not affect vehicular capacity. Right, just sort of these design templates. So how do we decongest Mumbai? We don't. How do you decongest? How many roads will we make? I don't know what else decongest means, right? So focus on kind of creating reliable. See, this is a quality of life issue. It has become a quality of life issue for us. So this is what I was saying, and people must change behavior. No, design influences behavior. Focus on that. Transport and the other thing about transport is it's also common knowledge, right? Everybody that experiences transport obviously has something to say, something to offer. For us researchers, it's data. For people, they think, boss, I'm also saying the right thing. But design influences behavior. Focus till you haven't fixed your design. You cannot sort of think about wanting to see. That's the thing, right? Is enforcement, infrastructure, behavior, management, they all work in circle. So everything is a problem. I have road safety in the center, you put anything else. Air quality, everything. How do you break the circle? I'm done. This is my last slide. Is you can only break this by fixing the infrastructure. First, fix this. This is going to kind of really influence a lot. This will make it easy to enforce. This will influence behavior, and overall, of course, by sort of that respect, the management. So that's it. I took too long. I totally skipped the part where we had to have discussion. But thank you for bearing with me and listening to me for this long.